Welcome to episode 564 of the show. Today, we're going to have an introduction to lead generation or the art of chasing customers. I was going to say hustling customers, but then I realized that on this podcast we have an international audience. And for Western listeners, hustling customers was not going to have a nice ring to it, because over here in Nigeria, Ghana, in this part of the world, when we say we're hustling a customer or hustling markets or hustling generally, it just means we're trying to put effort into something. We're thrifting, we are grinding, we're trying to get our business done. But then, for people in the West, in certain contexts, if you say you're hustling a customer, that means that you have cheated them out of some money or you've done something unethical. So that's the reason why I decided to change the title to Chasing Customers. Anyway, so the point of today's episode is not to let you guys in on the niceties of deciding titles when you have an international audience. So let's get straight down to business. Lead generation. Okay, now I'm going to make several assumptions in the recording of this episode. Number one, I'm going to assume that there are some people who are listening to this episode for the first time, and so to them, lead generation is going to sound like a whole lot of jazz that they are unfamiliar with. If you've been listening to the podcast for the last 5 or 6 episodes, you already know you already know what lead generation is. But bear with me. Let's just do a quick recap so that everybody can be brought on board before we start going into the nitty gritty, the details. So, who is a lead? A lead is someone who is possibly interested in your product or your service. Now, what does generation mean? Generation is just the act of creating something. Now, remember, I'm using working definitions here. So, if you go online or if you check your dictionaries or your business books, you're going to find much more technically or financially robust definitions, but we're just using simple definitions for now. So, if a lead is someone who is possibly interested in your product or service, and generation is the act of creating something, then lead generation is just the act of creating people who are interested in your product or service where none existed before. So that's going to be the simple definition that we're going to use going forward for this technical sounding word, lead generation. All we are talking about, thinking about, trying to do here is we're trying to create interested people where none existed before for our product or our service. Now, is that something that can be done? The answer is yes. And in fact, that is the main purpose of a business. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast for over a year, you'll remember from the episodes that we had on professionalism, communication, and networking, there was a little stint where we discussed the purpose of a business and we examined Peter Drucker's position, which is that, Peter Drucker is a famous management consultant, business consultant, management consultant in America, or was. I think he's dead. I really should cross check. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so his position was that the main purpose of a business actually is creating customers. Because if you don't have a customer, then you have no business. And the example that I gave in the professionalism, communication, and networking episode, especially since that was geared towards people in the wedding and the event space, because back then this podcast used to be called I think it was called the wedding sales for the Nigerian wedding industry. I think that was the old title. So the example that I gave then was that if you consider yourself to be a wedding planner and you don't have any customers or any potential customers, then there is simply nobody over whose wedding you will plan. So in other words, if you're a wedding planner but there's no customer, there is no wedding planning business. So the primary thing that we do when we wake up in the morning as a wedding photographer, as a planner, as a carpenter, as a business consultant, uh, as a trucker, let's say you're in the transportation business, whatever it is you do, the primary thing we do when we wake up every day is we figure out, how can I create a customer today? How can I get a customer today? And if you look at it through that lens, then lead generation is the most important thing that we do in the business, because we are trying to create someone who is interested in the product or service where none existed before. So, no interested people, no potential customers, no business. So, this is the most important thing that we do when we wake up every single day. And that's part of the reason why this podcast is here, because we can't call ourselves business people if this is not our primary concern on a day-to-day basis. And these are the kinds of subjects that we discuss over here on the podcast, because these are the things that help us create interest in people, initiate conversations with them, figure out what their need is, figure out who best you can help, figure out if you have the solutions or the inventory, try to get them to take action, how to get the right results for them, and then what else? Yes, make sure that they're happy so that they can come back for repeat business, and then bring their friends, their family members, and their associates along. So that's the whole point, and that's the crux of everything that we discuss over here on the podcast. So, summary: a lead, someone who is interested in your product or your service. Lead generation is just creating interest in people where none existed before. And yes, it's something that everybody can do, and it should be our main preoccupation. Even if you're a beautician, you don't have a customer, there's nobody to beautify. And now, what are the means of lead generation? We can go that. If we're going to answer that question today, we'll go well over 30 minutes. So I think I'll just cap it here, since we've done 6 minutes already, and the prior episodes were really long. I think in the series of the last 5 or 6, I think we had maybe like 2 or 3 30-minute episodes. So I'll just bring it to a close here. Okay, well, just as an intro, I'll put it this way: the means of lead generation. The approach I'd like to handle it is to talk about new school ways of doing things and old school ways of doing things. For new school, let's just say online, and for old school, let's just say offline. So we'll tackle all of that in the next episode. So thanks for hanging out with me here on episode 564. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next episode.